So we've already talked a little bit about physical variation that might be the result of cultural influences, but culture impacts health in a lot of ways. And the biggest one is, of course, socioeconomic status. And so what you find is that if people are relatively low in socioeconomic status, they have a much higher, mortality rate. So as a rule, this is true. Income goes up, lifespan goes up. And this is true not just within the United States, but if you look cross-culturally, you can see here we got on the x-axis per capita gross domestic product, on the y-axis life expectancy. And it's pretty clear that it is a pretty strong line there. But as you can see, once the income passes somewhere around $20,000, it stops being really an upward trend and almost becomes a flat trend. So once you get past that point, the relationship kind of collapses. You find that this has been true everywhere, higher SES, etc. But what you find in Burkina Faso used to be called Ivory. No, it used to have a different name, and I can't remember what it was. But anyway, Burkina Faso uh, has a group that lives there, has lived there. The what is it? The Thermosi and the Rimabi, whatever. They've lived there for many, many, many thousands of years. They have now evolved a genetic resistance to malaria, which is a leading cause of death in that area. And so what happens is about 200 years ago, another cultural group, the Fulani, moved in, and the Fulani did not have this genetic resistance to malaria. And the Fulani came in and they were higher in SES. And what happened is they conquered the Mosi and the Ramai, they enslaved them, etc. And so even though the Fulani do not have the genetics to resist malaria, they actually have a lower rate of malaria than the Mosi and Ramai. Presumably, as we're going to get to in a slide or two, living life in the Mosi or Ramai cultural groups is probably very stressful because you're poor and you're enslaved and you're dominated. Okay? We find though in some strange situations, what happens is sometimes an immigrant group will have better health outcomes than the host culture or the majority, despite having lower SES. And sometimes this is explained with social support that people in particular the Hispanic community tend to have higher social support. But there's some other explanations too. The salmon bias notion is that sometimes older immigrants return to their home country. That is, older immigrants that would be the ones that would be more likely to have health issues and to be dying don't do so in the United States, therefore making it appear as though this immigrant population is in fact healthier, or more specifically, and we'll definitely expand on this one in the topic 15, the healthy migrant effect. That the immigrants that you see in the United States, as a general rule, are not an average representation of people from the countries they came from. Generally speaking, immigrants that come to America tend to have more resources, tend to be more educated, tend to. They don't represent, and therefore it's possible that this paradox that we're seeing is a function of the fact that if people are really gravely ill, they don't immigrate. They don't have the opportunities. They don't get the resources. But stress and health is a huge connection, as we talked about with the Burkina Faso groups. And stress affects health in multiple ways. Number one, it's the immune system. And number two, people that are under a lot of stress tend to engage in non-healthy behaviors. But you even find that some culture or some environments like New York City is just stressful in itself, just the act of being in New York City. And people have more heart attacks in New York City. Even visitors to New York City have an increased rate of heart attacks while in New York City. You find this exact same type of a connection in non-human primates who have social hierarchies. Their hierarchies are not based on socioeconomic status, but clearly, in the world of humans and in the world of monkeys, it's very stressful to be poor. It doesn't matter how you define poor. Poor in terms of money, poor in terms of access to, food and community resources. But you then find that in the United States, we have some ethnic differences in health outcomes. And so, as a rule, you might find the European American uh, segment of the population having, on average, higher socioeconomic status. But as you can see on this list here, that it's not a clear outcome that the group that has higher SES is necessarily the healthiest.